and welcome to Smeg and the Femmes, a podcast to discuss Red Dwarf from a different perspective. I'm Jan Amelie, and today I'll be talking about Series 5, Episode 5, Demons and Angels, in which we meet a certain low rimmer. And I'll be exploring this episode with the help of my guest, Veronica Rich. Welcome back to the podcast.
Howdy from the Midwest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to talk to you again. Okay, so this, yeah, yeah. So this is, of course, a very popular episode amongst those of us who enjoy shipping, and we will get to that in due course. But I think the best way to approach this is to start at the start. So that would be, of course, the triplicator scene, which I think is a good sort of it's really sort of sets up the episode really well. The premise that Crichton and Lister have adapted the matter paddle, and have worked out how into a triplicator. And to be honest with you, I mean, this is probably I notice a lot. Now I'm rewatching for the purpose of the podcast, and the first thing that struck me watching this particular scene is Rimmer seems really jealous of the fact that Lister and Crichton have teamed up and done something, I mean, or is that just me?
I think he always feels that way anytime Lister's involved with teaming up with anyone else, but especially Crichton, because, I mean, Crichton is very obviously, looking at the theme of the podcast, if that Rimmer sees Lister as, kind of a partner or whatever, Crichton would clearly be, I don't know, maybe the chief rival for his time and, dare I say, affection.
You you don't need to read any of it. I mean, obviously we do ship, we do ship, but I mean, you don't need to ship even to see that.
Right.
It can work completely platonically as well. And I mean. I think basically what I think it is Rimmer is subconsciously jealous of Lister. The bond between Lister and Crichton. He doesn't. He doesn't. You don't even need to think. Of it as romantic jealousy on his part. I mean, personally, I do. But
and you're right. Yeah, I mean, if you were non-shippy, I guess you would see Lister to him as the closest thing he's ever had to a brother. Like, Lister has been nicer to him and done more for him than his own family. So yeah, I mean that's kind of his person in this universe, so to speak.
Yeah. And of course, Crichton very much also thinks of Lister as his person, So
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just kind of ironic, that Rimmer would sort of, make a sort of Dorksville jibe. I mean, given his own hobbies. I mean,
oh, definitely. But he thinks his own hobbies are grand things to be involved in and not base at all. And yeah, he's a little weird about it anyway. So.
It's true. It's true, definitely. Yeah.
I like the concept, like from a sci-fi angle. I like the concept, the high concept idea of the triplicator. Um, and I don't know. I was just kind of thinking out of my head last night when I was rewatching it. What would be better, to have a triplicator that would make two copies of anything perfectly, like a cloner, or is it better to have something like this where it separates the divine from the nasty? I was trying kind of thought experiments, trying to think, well, which would you want more? Because you could have three perfectly good strawberries, or you could have a good strawberry and a divine one, and then another one that you can't do anything with.
I mean, it's difficult, really. Grant Naylor, they obviously put in the bit about the poppies only having a lifespan of about an hour because they have that to explain why the crew wouldn't just stay on the high ship and have done work. I'm sure.
So if you ate a bowl of good strawberries, would you be hungry again an hour later?
And that is a very, very good point. I mean, and it's also the way when Lister said this is going to solve all our supply issues, is the idea that they just, quickly eat any food before it vanishes.
This is true. This is true. If your body can only turn it into something so quickly. So, but and then we get the giant explosion where I'm not sure why that was done in slow mo. I guess maybe to make it look more impressive. I don't know enough about filmmaking to.
I think the idea was, they decided they were going to blow up the ship, and an expensive model they put a lot of work into, so they wanted to get their money's worth out of the explosion, I guess.
It seems that way. Another thing too, you mentioned already about the fact that the ships are only going to be in existence for about an hour or so. I was kind of looking at it last night, and about halfway through the episode, I thought, well, if they come into existence and they're only going to last for a short time, what kind of you go on and you meet the highs and the lows, and they're full people. They've got long relationships, memories, whatever. And I'm thinking, but where did they get those from? Like, if they've only been in existence for a short time, do they think they've had full lifetimes? Is it kind of like the Matrix that way? I mean,
I think, well,
I don't know.
they seem to, don't they? Because, I mean, I think it's High Crichton who says, we spend our time philosophy, reciting poetry, etc., etc. So clearly, they think they've been around for longer than less than an hour. I mean, they have memories, so yeah, it's.
So do they have their implanted memories pulled from the best and worst of the real people? Or could you argue that maybe each of these ships and these people exists in a parallel dimension or a different plane, and they've just been pulled into this dimension? I'm really spouting nonsense, but
It's headache inducing, but I mean, it would probably make more sense to, you know, they've kind of been pulled from a parallel dimension, some kind of parallel dimension, or something, because otherwise you start giving yourself a headache.
yeah, yeah, I think so. Something to think about. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I was going to say actually, it's interesting the way they sort of change direction, because I mean, they suddenly have to evacuate Red Dwarf, emergency
Yeah,
situation, and you think they're going to be stuck on Starbuck for the rest of the episode, because that's what seems to be setting up,
right.
and then of course, they change tack with the two Red Dwarfs, but I mean. In the 5 minutes or so where they think they're stuck on Starbuck, there's some interesting sort of dynamics going on. What I always notice is the way Lister immediately takes charge, and starts saying, "Okay, you do this, you do that." It's
Right.
yeah,
No,
interesting. He's
I
just a
see what you're
natural
saying.
leader.
And Rimmer, latches. It's interesting how Rimmer goes to Creighton and is like, "Hey, we could cut off we could last longer. They're going to run out of oxygen anyway." And I see that, and I think there's no way he is approaching this seriously, because if he's proposing pushing Lister on an airlock, there's no way. Creighton is like the last one you'd go to for that. Like, I don't know why. I think maybe he's just, I don't know. He's taking out his frustrations and something somehow, because he knows he can get away with saying this stuff to Crichton, and it's not actually going to happen. Like, Lister's not actually going to get pushed out of an airlock.
It doesn't make any. I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah,
He must know that Crichton would never contemplate it for even 1 second. So I mean, the way you've explained it makes a bit more sense. I mean, and I did notice also how utterly hurt Lister looks. I mean, it's like
yeah, yeah.
he cannot believe it, and there's actually an interesting echo of it later when Lister meets Low Rimmer, and he's like, "Why do you want to hurt me?" It's like he physically can't comprehend it, and it's like Low Rimmer is a extreme version of this earlier scene we got with Rimmer.
But Lister is. I feel like this show's been on for almost 35 years, and every time Rimmer does something, like in the episode where he leaves in the escape pod. I mean, he's known Rimmer for a long time, and he is. It's like you say. He looks so hurt and surprised. Like every time he does something, you know, he thought he couldn't get any lower. He thought he wouldn't still be like this. Like, he doesn't seem surprised at all. I think the first time I see him ever not really be surprised by it is like season 11, Officer Rimmer, where 11 or 12, I forget. Yeah, Officer Rimmer, where he turns into a complete, bonehead with his promotion. Like, he doesn't seem surprised by that at all, but I mean, that's after what, 30 years?
By then, Lister has, got used to it. He's like, and it's like, he's just he has to do this, every so often, just shrug, and after a while he'll get tired of it, or he'll
Yeah.
or he'll trip himself up on his own. He'll
But
make
I wonder, but I wonder if off camera, the parts we're not watching in between the episodes, I wonder if like most of the time Rimmer is quite not that bad. Or he says little things here and there that, give Lister hope that, maybe he's a decent human being somewhere in there. That maybe that's why he looks so surprised all the time. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really the only thing which makes sense, because obviously we only see edited highlights of their lives in
Right.
the most dramatic parts of it, and it just kind of makes more sense, that we see their worst moments and sometimes their best moments. Obviously, the end of Horror Ship will probably be one of Rimmer's. Although, of course,
Yes.
we never even know whether Lister knows about that. I've already covered Hollow Ship with Feline Mania,
Right.
and it's actually never made clear in the episode whether the rest of the crew know about Nirvana at all. So
That's true. That's true. That's true. You make a good point. I'd like to think at some point when, I'm sure they have a lot of heart to heart talks. They have to, as well as they know each other, and they're only stuck with each other basically. So I have to think at some point, he does tell at least Lister about Nirvana, because Lister is like the one person who would have some empathy with him, like, because he knows what it's like to lose a woman, and he would, I would think if he was looking for any sympathy, that's the direction to go in.
I would have thought so. Yeah, you're right. Like I say, if Lister didn't know at the time, he must know sometime in the intervening years. It's hard to believe that River wouldn't have confided that at some stage.
Right.
Quite possibly. Maybe not until the day Vera, when he's come back from being ace. But who knows?
Right. Plus, he got his Endoy on the ship, and Rimmer loves to talk about like 3 times in life he got to do that.
It's true for Nirvana. He seemed to sort of think of it in a different way. Because we never see or hear him sort of bragging about it in the way he does
Exactly.
about Magruder. So
Yeah.
Yeah. You feel as though it did mean more to him. You could say the fact that he never mentions it again is in sort of in the same league as Lister never really talking about Jim and Bexley again. I say never. He does mention them. He says in this very episode, "I've given birth to twins," but he doesn't
Right.
really talk. He doesn't really talk about them. He doesn't mention them by name.
It's kind of the two bits of tragedy in their lives that it feels like Doug and Rob at the time really can't seem to mine for any more comedy. So why bring it up?
Exactly. Yeah. It's just a little bit too tragic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Anyway.
moving on to the high ship, which I must admit, I kind of wish we could have spent a little more time on that, because I actually really like the high ship. Yes, the high crew are a bit irritating, but it's a nice, pleasant, soothing environment.
Oh yeah. Oh, it is. It's very clean. So
Very
clean.
Very clean, yeah. And you hear sort of heavenly music, and we're told that the food is wonderful. Well, we're kind of homoerotically told that the food is wonderful, actually.
And I bet it smells good too. The ship.
Yeah.
It looks like it smells good, or at least like nothing.
Yeah. This is kind of a good episode, though, for the small number of people. Sorry, I don't mean to insult them, but I think it is a small number of people who ship Lister and Cat. This is a good episode for them.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's some great little moments here and there. And it's interesting. This whole episode seems to kind of divide. I mean, not all the way through, but it seems to split these. If you want to split into pairs, which happens a lot in these episodes, it seems to kind of split Rimmer and Crichton, and then Lister and Cat, like in more than one scene.
Yeah, I mean, obviously part of it's because they had all these extra versions of the main characters, and they had to fill around with split screen. But I think
Right.
it might also be something to do with the fact, that obviously Lister and Cat as the ones who actually breathe and need oxygen and stuff are kind of more vulnerable. I mean, obviously that is why it's Lister that's later captured, because he's one of the ones that can be hurt. Whereas there would be much point in kidnapping stuff like Rimmer or Crichton, really, would there?
True. True. Um, I was watching them last night. I was watching them, have the poetry and the music and the dancing, and they're sitting watching. And the thought occurred to me, and I thought, how well would Christine Kachansky too get along with these guys? They probably know how to play Guess the Aria.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but yes, I mean, actually, Kurchansky too would probably get on really well with them. I mean, she might get a bit sort of eye-rollingly impatient, with their mega niceness, but I mean, I think most of the time, she would get on well with them. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I think they could definitely socialize with her, and if she could get past their annoying penchant for being better than her. I don't know.
Yes.
Just by the dint of their
I
existence.
had never thought this before, and now I'm quite now I kind of want to write a little booklet about it or something, about her and
plus,
Cam.
you'd have female Holly. She'd have another woman to,
Exactly. Yeah, I
another
mean,
female presence to get along
really,
with.
it's kind of dismal that the only two female regulars we get on the show never interact at all. Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, if you count if you count Kochansky, if you count, it depends. I mean, if you count Kochansky one, she kind of interacts with male Holly, but it's Rimmer hijacking her body, so really it doesn't count. It doesn't count to me. It's like you have one female character on screen at any time, and that's your lot.
exactly. Exactly.
But let's not get too off topic. Going back to the highs. I mean, um, it's. I mean, I like the highs. I mean, yes, it's kind of problematic the way they're. Well, problematic is probably the wrong word. Dubious the way they're all exactly the same when the lows all have their individual personalities. But
Yeah,
um,
but I think we have. If you in literature, I kind of feel like sometimes, like in literature and storytelling, there are more. It feels like there are more descriptions for or excuses, whatever you want to call them, for ways to be dubious or bad than there are for ways to be good. If that makes sense.
yeah, but basically, it's the kind of virtue is boring kind of assumption. Yeah,
Right. It's like, why spend we're going to go meet these lows. We're going to have adventures on their ship. So do we want to spend too much time with these guys? I kind of feel like the writers were that way too, which is unfortunate because it would have been interesting to see it parsed out a little more.
I mean, I must admit, for a long time, I kind of, well, I didn't fast forward, but I always wanted to get to the low part. But I mean, I've kind of, I've kind of developed an appreciation for the highs, because they are very, there's interesting things you can say. And
What?
as I mentioned on Tumblr earlier in the week, I think the fact that they all have forehead adornments is probably to be in solidarity with High Rimmer, so he doesn't feel like the odd one out having an H on his forehead.
Yeah, I never thought about that before I read that post, and it never occurred to me. And I thought, wow, actually a pretty good explanation. That's a good observation.
I mean, of course, that might not have been it. It might have just been, give them robes, crystals, forehead adornments, anything we can think of that suggests spiritual. But I mean, in universe, I mean, it makes complete sense, that they would do it as a sort of communal kind of solidarity thing.
Do they never? And I wonder, do they never have? I mean, I guess they would never have arguments. Do they ever have conflict among them? I mean, do they just all? I mean, they've only existed for an hour, but in their minds, they've existed for, decades. So, I mean, do they never not get along? I'm
Great.
wondering what their backstory is. How did they end up 3 million years out in deep space? Did they come from a crew of 1,100 highs on a ship that somehow got killed? I don't know. It
Well, the
kind
thing
of
is,
beggars the questions.
of course, they seem, incapable. Well, I mean, don't want to say completely incapable of making decisions. They're not incapable, but I mean, they have to, consult with absolutely everybody, to make sure they're not putting anybody out, etc., etc. So you can understand how, in an emergency situation, they would be completely useless, to put it nicely. And also the fact that they seem completely incapable of registering malice. I mean, even when remote controlled Lister is stabbing his high version, it's like he doesn't register it. I mean, he doesn't even seem to feel the pain. It's like, forgive me, brother. I appear to have stained your knife with my blood. It's like they don't even register pain, which is kind of odd.
I know, permit me to furnish you with a fresh knife. But I sort of wonder if that's the thing. Maybe their version of pain is just less happiness, less pleasure. If they've really been separated out this way, that may be why the lows inflict the pain so much. They like really enjoy it because that's their version of pleasure or high feeling. Not high feeling, but intense
I mean,
feeling, I should say.
that kind of makes sense, because I mean, obviously, I mean, the highs, they just they don't appear to register physical pain, whereas the lows are all about physical pain, as well as other kinds of pain, if they can, get those into, but mostly physical pain. So yeah, that is an interesting contrast. Now you mention it. Uh-huh.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I haven't quite finished with the highs. Oh yes, I did. It did occur to me when they were doing the entertainment for our crew. I mean, obviously it's ridiculous, and you chuckle and stuff, but it does kind of make good use of the actors in out of universe other talents, because you get high cat dancing and you get high lister reciting poetry, more or less. So yeah,
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
like, yeah. I did notice, Craig sort of, as high lister, sort of intoning in the same way that he would to obviously to recite his own poetry, So, but it's just nice the way they managed to make use of the actors' other talents. And of course, I'm getting to the fact that obviously they couldn't do that with Chris, because High Rimmer would be far too nice to do impressions of people, wouldn't he?
true, true. He would only do good impressions. He would only he'd be like, brothers, who is your favorite performer? Who would you like to hear from tonight? Something like that.
Yeah, yeah, no, that is a way. I mean, if you could do it as a nice kind of way to entertain people, maybe he would have got around to that if they hadn't been interrupted by the Lowe's distress signal. What a
Yes.
shame.
I
Okay.
wonder how I wonder how much the lows knew about the existence of the highs and the mediums, the originals, because when they land on the low ship, they're like immediately attacked. Like
Yeah.
it's
So
almost like they
clearly,
knew, expecting them to show in.
clearly they were expecting. I mean, obviously they sent a distress signal to the high ship.
That's true.
Presumably they must have looked out of a window somewhere, or whatever, and seen, oh, hold on, there's another red dwarf, and it's probably better than ours. And even if it isn't, it'll be fun getting these poor naive suckers over to be attacked.
That makes sense. That makes sense. They're almost like simulants that way. Like, we're gonna lure them in and pound.
Exactly. And I am almost at the lows, but and I do want to talk about them a lot. But one more thing on the highs. I mean, it comes a bit later, but I mean, I think it makes sense to cover it here, which is obviously with Low Rimmer, the way he greets Lister, is very memorable. Hello, my pretty. But
Yes.
I did notice in the later scene, between High Lister and High Rimmer, just before they get killed, um, High Lister says to High Rimmer, "Have I told thee today how much I love thee, brother? How much, etc., etc." And basically, he tells High Rimmer he has a beauteous countenance. So
Yes.
it's not just low Rimmer who aesthetically appreciates or fancies or whatever you want to call it his opposite number. It is also high Lister. So that makes it more interesting and more complex than low Rimmer just being a homophobic stereotype. Do you see what I mean?
Right. Well, was it on Tumblr? Was it Lord Valerie Mimes who made the comment, said this episode shows not only how much the better part of Rimmer loves Lister and how much the low part of Rimmer wants Lister.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yes. Shout out to Lord Valerie Mimes because I did go back and look at her meta about the highs and the lows, and whilst I was preparing for this, and I wanted to make that point. I mean, obviously, it's problematic, to say love is good, lust is bad, but they're writing in sort of broad strokes, obviously, for the purposes of comedy. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. And lust without any care, maybe the point of that is bad in this
Yeah, I
sense, at
mean,
least.
Yeah, I mean, Low Lister says, he's to Lister that he's the part of you that lusts after meaningless sex. I mean, I
Yes,
mean, there's nothing wrong with meaningless sex. As long as it's consensual. I think the consensual part might be part of it.
exactly, exactly. But we think too, we're watching this too through our current lens. When this aired, you and I are of an age when this aired 30 years ago, that struck a chord. Whereas now, you say something to young people about meaningless sex, and I think they just kind of look at you strange. It's like, well, everybody should get to do what they want to as long as it's consensual. You
It's
don't have to pair up with
exactly.
someone for 70 years to have sex with them. So what's the big deal?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we should probably, I mean, I don't want to get on the tangent, but just to put it in a early '90s context, obviously in the early '90s, only were people generally more homophobic. There was the spectre of AIDS, so that kind of underpinning a lot of, I mean, I guess that's kind of another reason why uh, people wouldn't have the attitude today that younger people, at least on Tumblr, have to this kind of thing, which is basically, as long as everyone's old enough and consenting, just do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah, I think the attitudes now, I wasn't alive in the 60s, but I think it probably goes back to that point, and maybe even the 70s where things were a little looser. And then you had that kind of pinch in the middle there in the 80s and 90s of, um, this could kill you. So it's
I
very
mean,
unfortunate.
yeah, it's very,
And
yeah. Mm.
and you will probably speak. You probably have a note to speak more on this yourself. But yeah, since you brought it up, when this aired, I know I've seen comments from, I guess, maybe younger people who have watched this and been like, well, the low part seems kind of a negative portrayal of gayness or whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, it was 1991. I mean, attitudes were a lot different 30 years ago about it, and you can still see remnants of that in some of the, in our country anyway, the right wingers. You can still see a lot of remnants of trying to squash that down and make it look bad. But I think on the wider scale, it's much more accepted and much more positively seen now.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, in your country, just to briefly sidetrack, it's you obviously legalised same-sex marriage, and for quite recently. And to be fair, back in the early '90s, it wasn't legal in the UK either. I think it was sort of shortly after the turn of the century that we made it legal. So yeah, I mean, so putting it in that context, I mean, when this episode was made and broadcast in the US and
Right.
UK, people of the same gender weren't allowed to get married, legally. So
Right.
yeah, so
Well, yeah,
yeah.
especially. I mean, heck, it was even dangerous to come out here. I mean, Ellen DeGeneres did it. That was like the late '90s, and she lost a show over it because a fictional character. I mean, I think I think if I remember my timeline correctly, Ellen went off the air, and then a year later, Will and Grace premiered, and it got really grave reviews. and was really, led to a lot of acceptance. But it was just, just a year before that, someone lost their show for coming out both in real life and on the show as gay. So, I mean, attitudes have changed pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
do remember. I mean, the thing with Ellen and so. I mean, I was kind of watching all that play out in real time. So I mean,
Yeah.
a heck of a lot has changed.
Excuse me.
I mean,
Anyway, didn't mean to sidetrack you.
yeah, no, yes, it's okay. We should, get back on track. So the low ship, and obviously, it's obvious from the start, that it's going to be a complete contrast to the high ship, and you can tell from
Oh yeah.
the dark griminess, etc. And you're like, see, what is going to happen? I mean, if you've never seen it before, and the way they introduce each low crew member for maximum shock effect. I mean, it's well done.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think Low Cat gets enough credit. I love the fangs. I mean, he's very much like a saber-toothed tiger. It's kind of
Oh yes,
funny.
I did mean what to say about Low Cat. It's one of the things where Doug clearly had in mind when he or I was either Doug or Howard Burden, because in the Promised Land, Rodon, who of course turns out to be Cat's older brother,
Yep.
is costumed similarly to Low Cat.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah,
didn't think about that. Oh, that's a good point. And kind of acts like Low Cat too.
does, doesn't it? Yeah. Which, of course, makes a lot of sense, because I mean, Rodon was supposed to be a character, who was doing his own thing, and very proud of being a cat, whereas our cat, has become more sort of human.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I do want to say, I mean, I feel very stupid, because I mean, the number of times I watched this episode, I didn't realise until I read someone point it out, what Low Cat is eating is actually his own high counterpart. I somehow never realised that.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Because you don't see him again.
That they've just killed
Ew.
High Cat and High Crichton. For some reason, I just thought.
Aw.
For some reason, I just thought he was eating some random raw meats that he happened to be carrying around with him.
Oh.
No, I'm afraid. I'm afraid
Hmm.
it's poor High Cat.
Yeah, they're gonna disappear in an hour anyway. So
Yeah, yeah. Sorry to gross you out, but I mean the loads are gross.
that's pretty good. No, no, I like that. It's like, oh, I mean, I don't like it, but that's funny.
I don't have that much to say about Low Lister, to be honest. I mean, which is unusual for me. I mean, but usually most alternate versions of Lister, I find a lot to
I
say about. But I think he kind of got a bit shortchanged, frankly.
I didn't care. Yeah, I thought I was the only one who didn't care for Low Lister. I think, I mean, I feel like Low Rimmer steals the show. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't think of this episode without thinking of Frankenfurter Rimmer. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
that's the
very,
association.
very rocky horror. Yeah.
But Low Lister is just, it's a weird direction. I wonder, how much direction these actors were given to play their low selves and how much they were told, okay, do your own interpretation of it. Because obviously, I wonder what direction Low Rimmer was given, that Chris was given for Low Rimmer, because
I
he
must
is
say, I
really
would love
super,
to be a
super.
fly on the wall when they read the script for this episode and they got to the bit where he's like, "I'm going to have you."
And the way he says it, like in the room later when they're torturing Lister, and he's like, he thinks terrible things, and the faces he made.
Yeah, I
My
mean, it's
God.
like, I mean, we haven't quite got to. We kind of have, but we haven't quite got to that scene with Owen. But I mean, like you say, he steals the show so much, and obviously everything Chris does as Low Rimmer is so obviously sexual that I don't know how
Oh God,
you could read it any
yeah.
other way.
And it's all aimed at Lister. I mean, it is not aimed at any of the other characters at all.
It's true. I mean,
It's not even aimed at his Lister. It's like, you don't even see him interacting with his Lister.
you don't. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of odd. I mean, obviously when they're all sort of torturing him, I mean, all the focus is on our Lister. You don't really get
Right.
you don't really get much of a sense of the individual relationships between the Lows. I mean, presumably they must have them. But we don't really get much of a sense of it. I just want to go back very briefly and say it's neat the way they introduce Low Crichton, and obviously, what is the most out of character thing that Crichton could do? Attack Lister.
Low Crichton reminds me of Hudson 10.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, um, yeah, it's very disturbing. I mean, someone on Tumblr who, unfortunately, I can't remember right now, or I'll credit them. Also pointed out that it's really disturbing. It's Low Crichton who's the one who puts the spinal implants in Lister, because obviously usually he's like Florence Nightingale towards Lister, and wants to look after him when he's ill, and obviously it's the exact reverse.
Right. Well, that's why I said earlier, if pain is like their version of the highest attainment of, sensory input, then inflicting pain on Lister would sort of be loving, maybe in his version. I don't know.
Kind of. Interestingly, Low Cat appears to enjoy pain himself, because if you notice, after they force Lister to pour boiling water on himself, Low Cat actually takes the presumably hot kettle, and holds it to his face. So he appears to enjoy pain as well.
Yes, yes. I think they would all really get into it, but yeah, he seems very feral. I mean, the rest of them just seem, you know, into pain, but of course, him being part animal, it
Yeah,
makes sense that he seems very feral.
the feral cats in the Promised Land. I mean, it does make sense. Well, actually, when we get to the next episode, I have a similar point to make about retrospective things which were made more interesting by TPL. But I'll wait till we get to that
Okay,
episode to make that point. It's just interesting with
okay.
2 episodes in a row. I don't know, they both involve cats, but anyway, never mind. Yeah, I'll get back to the Lows. Yeah. Let me see. Like I said, yeah, Low Lister doesn't really hit for me. I mean, Low Cat is a bit more interesting, made more interesting retrospectively by Rodon, and Low Crichton
Right,
makes absolute sense, because he just does the opposite of regular Crichton. Oh,
right.
before we get properly onto Low Rimmer, I do want to give a shout out to Low Holly, because from what little we see of her, she's good.
Oh yeah, very, very dominatrix.
Exactly, a sort of hot goth dominatrix who should have got more screen time. I know all.
Definitely.
I
Now,
know
now, see, that's a version.
Yeah,
That's a version of Holly I would have liked to have seen full bodied. What kind of costume would they have put her in? So,
exactly. Yeah, and the few lines she has, she delivers in a completely different voice to regular Holly. Obviously, So I mean, it would be interesting to see more of her. Actually,
right.
I remember somebody in Discord. I think it was Gross Ferratu Shep. Yeah. I mean, I don't think he listens to this, but I just want to credit him in a way. Saying you could write a very interesting fic about Low Holly. Sort of messing with all the low crews, the low crew, and them getting worse and worse directly because of her. Because obviously she presumably controls Low Rimmer's projection for a start.
Right. And not only that, but yeah, just basically running things for them, which they would probably enjoy that. I don't know.
Would, yeah. I mean, now you mention it, but anyway, let's get properly onto Low Rimmer. I just wanted to do the rest of the episode justice before we got to him, but yeah, um, it's kind of difficult to know where to start when you get to Low Rimmer, because it's like sudden pan up. You see he's wearing suspenders. Hello, my pretty. I mean, he's so obviously meant to be, a sort of kind of Frankenfurter type, that's. I,
Right.
I don't see how you could read him any other way, really. I mean, I have.
I'm really upset they put him in boots and not heels, but that's my only
Should
quibble.
he been in heels, really, shouldn't he? You know, I mean, uh, yeah, it's kind of a bit of a cheat to put him in sort of flat glittery boots, but
I wonder if they were going to, and Chris couldn't walk in them or couldn't handle them.
that
Just
is
a side.
entirely possible. Because I mean, you know, obviously he has complained at length about how uncomfortable the costume was. Maybe he said, "Look, can we lose the heels at some stage?"
Right. But I'm looking, yeah, like we're sitting here and I've got the episode playing here on silent while we're talking, and it's gotten to the part where where they're torturing Lister in various ways, and just Low Rimmer's face throughout the entire thing. I mean, it is just his expressions are blatantly interested, like blatantly,
Yeah, I mean, you know,
like
I have to be fair for 1 second. I have seen the argument, you know, that he's just a sadist who wants to, you know, hurt Lister, but I don't really see how you can, you know, even given the fact that he literally says, "I want to have you." I mean, I don't see how you watch Chris's performance and
I've
read it in a non-sexual fashion. I mean, how can you?
we've seen regular Rimmer take pleasure in stuff happening to Lister and the other characters. We've seen him like visibly enjoy it or, appreciate it or whatever. It doesn't look sexual.
Yeah, but this blatantly looks sexual. I mean, come on, he
This does.
stands there,
There's
you
a
know,
difference.
literally doing pelvic thrusts in Lister's direction. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, it's sexual. It really, there's no other way of reading it. There just isn't.
exactly. So, I'm trying to think, how do you explain it other than that? I mean, if you can think of a better way to explain it than that, go for it.
I
I say
mean,
that, not to you, but like just to anyone who's watched it.
yeah, I mean, I think some people think, you know, well, you know, he just wants to rape him because, of course, that would hurt and humiliate him. You know, I mean, and I guess if you want to view it that way, I mean, obviously you are free to do so. You know, but it it kind of it seems to me to require, how do I put this? Ignoring a good portion of the episode, but well, whatever.
Well, and the thing is about the lows, is you could say, well, with it being the time it was, and they're using S&M, and back then it was acceptable, to associate S&M with a negative quality. You could say, well, they're playing it this way because the actors are just being outrageous and they're playing it negatively and they're playing it off. You can't read anything into it because they're playing it their version, what is perceived as negative. But the thing is, in the same episode, you have the highs, and you have, you know, High Rimmer looking at High Lister the same way, not the same way, but with love, like the way that. So it's you can't. The highs, I think, help frame it better, help
Exactly.
make the
Yeah,
argument more.
basically, if the highs weren't in the episode, it'd be a lot easier to dismiss as just a slightly dodgy homophobic stereotype.
Right?
But
Yeah,
the fact
exactly.
that the
I think the
highs are in
highs are
there as
what
well,
save it.
yeah. Yeah, the high. Yeah, I mean, obviously, that is one of the reasons why I can live with the fact that yes, it is obvious that there are elements of homophobic stereotype to no river. I mean, definitely there are, but it doesn't mean that I can't enjoy his character. Well, maybe enjoy is the wrong word. Appreciate.
And then you got Lister basically murdering himself and murdering Rimmer when he's controlled, but he would still hold himself responsible for doing it. He's not the type that would say, well, I was out of control and I had no agency.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's kind of odd the way they just sort of I mean, I would say that, but I mean, they do this a lot. The way the episode ends is kind of pretty traumatic,
We,
pretty traumatic for poor Lister, and they just kind of
exactly.
gloss over it. I mean, obviously, to be
Right.
fair, the rest of the crew they don't realise the extent of what he's been through, and they just sort of quickly cut to the credits. But I mean,
Right.
it's pretty traumatic. I mean, obviously it's the kind of thing which people write fan fiction about and do, But honestly, this is one of those episodes where you think, well, where's the rest of it?
Right. I wonder how many young people who watched this then and have watched it since have, as they've discovered Red Dwarf. I wonder how many young people have watched this and like LGBTQ young people have watched it and thought, oh, this makes me think something. This makes me reassess myself, helps them kind of come out.
I'm pretty sure, well, having been on Tumblr for nearly a decade now. I mean, I've read several younger people, saying it's kind of opened something, well, not so much awakened, as sort of made them realise, that realise something about themselves.
There's a bit I didn't want to pull off here. I didn't want to pull away. The part where I made a note, the part where Lister is choking Cat out. It's interesting how Rimmer like gets panicked and jumps in and tries to get Crichton to save the cat.
Yeah.
I mean, he's genuinely panicked about it.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of odd, isn't it? Because I mean, I don't know. I mean, Rimmer being soft light is not technically, well, I would say that, but you would think Rimmer would think he was technically at risk from Lister, but of course, actually, he is, because we've literally just seen remote controlled Lister crush poor high Rimmer's right beast. So yeah.
Right, but he actually shows concern for Cat.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I suppose the idea is that he's simply automatically aligning himself with the people who are not currently dangers, and in this case, that's Cat and Crossum. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to pull off there, but I did want to make that point because I thought it's very unusual for Rimmer to show concern for Cat. You don't see it all that often, just every once in a while.
Yeah. Now you mention that is quite unusual. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, it's odd. I mean, I thought I was going to talk more about the "Hello, My Pretty" scene, but obviously, I mean, I've I've talked about it so much over the years, and what it means is so blatantly obvious to me that I feel like well, just watch the damn episode,
Pull your own conclusions, but there's only one conclusion to pull. So
Precisely. I mean, as you said, I mean, the obvious conclusion is that the worst aspects of Rimmer want to rape Lister, whereas the best aspects of Rimmer are quite happy declaring their love for him.
that's why you got to have the medium.
Exactly.
They go to war with each
I
other.
hadn't thought of our crews as the mediums, but actually that's an interesting way to refer to them. Because obviously in this context they very much are the mediums.
Oh,
Oh, I did want to quickly there is a bit where Crichton and Cat are in the low bunk room looking for the third triplicator, and
yes.
they're sort of commenting on the Low's decor and movie collections and stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it makes sense that they would be into kind of Friday the 13th kind of films, but the music collection feels off to me. I mean, surely it would be death metal or something like that, because I mean, they make it sound like Low Rimmer has the same taste in music as normal Rimmer.
Well, that might be the joke. That Rimmer's
Maybe.
tastes are so bad.
I mean, you could put it that way, I guess. I just, I
I
mean,
mean, that's like when Crichton looks into the refrigerator, like, ooh, toasty toppers.
it's kind of an interesting collection of things, to demonstrate how utterly low and base they are, as Crichton puts it.
Yeah. Which it's got a counterpart, on the high ship where they're eating the pot noodles.
Yeah. It does work in some ways. The sort of grimed up bunk room does work aesthetically,
Exactly.
I mean, I know we've already mentioned it, but I just want to mention it again. It's so sweet and poetic the way High Lister and High Rimmer are like. Thy love cleanses and refreshes me like a babbling mountain stream, brother. It's just so sweet.
Yeah, I mean their love is obvious. They state it, they stare and gaze at each other, but there's no. It's just so pure, and it's so boring. I mean,
It is boring.
there's nothing behind it. There's no you've got all the heat over here where it's dangerous in the low ship.
Hmm.
I mean, they're just so sterile. I guess that's the word I'm
Yeah,
looking
actually,
for.
yes, sterile is a very good word for it. Whereas you could refer to the low crew as, I don't know, toxic maybe, or whatever the opposite of sterile is.
Very dirty. That ship
Grimy,
has a smell.
grimy. Hmm.
You can look at that ship and you know what it smells like.
Yeah. Ooh. Very much so. Right. Hmm. Hmm. Oh, well, I just want to say it's interesting, given that Rob and Dirk are two presumably heterosexual men who do not write slush fic, how they basically managed to write all this episode.
Yeah, yeah, I've thought that, and I've thought too about some of the things that Doug has written on his own in the 20 years since. There's little scenes here and there, little interactions he's written. I think maybe the moonlight scene in the Promised Land comes most to the forefront these days. That yeah, this could be between two brotherly people, but it doesn't really feel like it.
Exactly, which of course we will get to very much get to
Right.
in the next episode, But yeah, I mean, I mean, every time I watch this episode, I can't quite believe, that they actually filmed it. They actually filmed the nose, sort of strapping poor Lister to a table and torturing him. It's just,
While Low Rimmer stood off to the side and waggled his tongue at him, and
literally humping the air.
yes, exactly.
Yet somehow this episode is only rated PG. I mean, I know it is PG in some ways, as in, I mean, we don't sort of, nobody is seriously hurt or nothing bad actually happens if you don't count the poor highs. And I think
Yeah,
you have to not count the poor highs because in the same way, I guess that you don't count the wax droids in Meltdown, because they're technically not human because they've got a limited lifespan or something. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
right.
you could argue that High Lister is very much human, but I mean he was going to die in an hour, so I suppose.
I think the thing in this episode that most surprises me, I look at all of it and I think, okay, you could get away with filming that and showing that, for comedy value and all. But it's the "then I'm going to have you" line. I think that's the one line. It is not ambiguous. It's no other reason to put that line in. And if Lister were a woman, nobody would have any doubt about what that means.
It's interesting actually. I actually remember. I mean, this is years ago, but when the intro cast were reviewing this episode, they actually misheard that line at first because it's like I think the mishearing was because they literally couldn't believe he was saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a big difference between the two words, and it's very clearly enunciated.
This episode was famously a nightmare to film. It was Juliet May's first episode, and she had to handle
Yeah.
all these split screens. To be honest, I have a lot of sympathy for her. Imagine starting with this episode. I mean,
Oh yeah. And you don't know, you have no way of knowing that. You wonder if you're doing a job, and you think, oh, it's really discouraging because she left or was fired after, I forget which it was, but then like this is one of the most memorable episodes in 30 years. It's still regarded that way.
yeah, I mean, I think her name's on 4 episodes. Some of it is sort of co-directing with Grant Naylor. I mean, this episode
Yeah.
co-directing with Grant Naylor, and she also directed the opening sequence of Back to Reality, which is amazing. And she solo directed, I believe it's the Inquisitor and Hollow Ship. So I mean,
All very memorable.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, she could. Clearly, she was inexperienced in directing this kind of program, but she can't be that bad, basically, can she?
No. Yeah. No, definitely.
Especially since she's gone on to success in more sort of conventional kind of programs as I understand it. I mean, at
Right.
least they did interview her for the 5 documentary, and I think she came across pretty well, to be honest.
Yep.
Yeah, but
Well,
also the fact that this was a bit of a nightmare to film, and that they actually came back after the series 5 wrap party the next day to do reshoots, and everyone had a hangover and didn't want to be there. Yeah, but they had to do some reshoots for this episode. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe that kind of comes across on the screen when they're playing the lows.
Yeah, it could be. Maybe they're just drunk.
and generally pissed off and feeling sort of in a nasty mood. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm trying to think whether I've covered everything I wanted to cover. Yeah. I think I have. I mean, of course, the way it ends is basically sort of typical Grant Naylor heartless ending to an episode. Never mind all the trauma list that went through this episode. I mean, if you want more on that, then have a look at the fanfics on Archive of Our Own, basically.
Yeah, just do a search for the episode tag.
It's a very popular, very fanfic inspiring episode, which obviously you would very much expect it to be. I mean, it is one of my favourite episodes, but in another way, it isn't one of my favourite episodes. I mean, I can kind of objectively see that it's not as good as some of well, for example, the next episode we're going to discuss, quality wise. But I still very much love it as an episode, even though I can see it does have quite a lot of flaws.
Right. Well, it's the classic, good versus evil and examining it, and I mean, in their special way that they do it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, obviously, if this wasn't a comedy, it would have been, it could have been much bleaker in the way in the way they did it. But obviously, because they were writing it as a comedy, they had to present a lot of things as funny, which really objectively are not funny at all. But they pretty much do that all the time in Midwolf. So
I mean, and they don't call them their good selves and their evil selves. They call it high and low. So that, indicates somewhat that it's not really positive or negative. It's just this is the high parts of them, this is the low parts of them. And that's another reason, that I think the whole low Rimmer thing, maybe it shouldn't be as dismissed as it is by some parts of fandom. I think maybe they're trying to tell you something about Rimmer without coming out and saying it in a way they probably couldn't in 1991 on television.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it completely makes sense. I mean, Rimmer is a character who is very repressed in a lot of ways. So, I mean, why is it such a leap to imagine that he might repress his sexuality? I mean, I don't really get it, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if the show were starting now, there would probably be no issue with making him gay. But, after all this time, I'm kind of, it's a comedy. They're not really going to address that, but
yeah, I mean,
I don't know. It'd be kind of nice if they would, maybe, but it's not comedy, really.
I mean, I do realise, to be fair, I mean, it's not like we who ship them are sort of desperately watching the show, thinking maybe this episode they'll come out, maybe they come out. I mean, we know that's not going to happen. We're quite aware of it.
No,
we're just having fun,
Right, it's just comedy, but if you're going to spend time with it, you might as well read into it what you want to. So
yes, and the way I choose to read the show gives me a lot of enjoyment,
and honestly, if the writers are going to drop as many clues as they have over 30 years, there's some conclusions that are sort of inescapable. At least I think.
Exactly. I mean, of course, I mean, this isn't the only. This episode is not the only reason, that people ship them. For God's sake, there are countless other episodes.
Oh, the entire run of the series, yeah.
I mean, to be honest, with me, I mean, the one which really made me sort of, think, okay, there's something, I mean, sort of tip me over the edge into actively shipping them was actually Dimension Jump. I mean, so there you go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that might be even more.
Basically, it was the idea that there could be a version of Rimmer that actually liked Lister and got along with him. For some reason, that was what it needed to make it tip me over the edge, so to speak.
Right. Right. Well, not only liked him and got along with him, but like actively sought him out, defended him, you know.
And respected him,
Right.
and valued him, for the skills that he had, rather than
And the way he got so mad at River when River made the comment about, taking the bath together. I mean, he got pissed.
really, really,
Like it's
really.
the only time he got pissed.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think, that it's, the Ace's reaction was because, what you mean this version of me is homophobic as well? Oh dear.
Right. That's what I mean. I don't think he was mad because he insinuated something about, his own preferences, but
Yeah, then you
anyway.
see how utterly, completely calmly Ace reacts to being propositioned by Bongo. I mean, I really don't think Ace is homophobic,
No. No.
Admittedly, I'm biased because, well, I like Ace, but there you go. Okay. Did you have anything in particular else you wanted to say about this episode, or shall we wrap it up?
No, I mean, I'd probably come up with all kinds of things if we weren't at the hour mark, but no, I can't think of anything. I think you've covered pretty well, and
Yeah.
but
Like I said,
it was good to listen to hear you talk about it because I know how much you like the episode.
I really do. I like the episode a great deal. Yes, it's one of those episodes that I must have watched so many times. Uh, it's 30 years since I first saw it. And and that particular scene with Low Women made such an impression. And
Yeah.
yeah, one of those episodes that you can watch over and over. And I do understand why some people wouldn't like it, because it's not what you call the most likable episode, or at least the bits with the lows aren't, but it's a very interesting
Right.
episode psychologically.
Right.
Mm. Anyway, just one more thing before I wrap up, which is, scores out of 10 would you give this, both overall and for slashiness? And frankly, if you don't give it 10 out of 10 for slashiness, I'll be surprised.
You can kick me off your podcast. Let's do this nice.
You don't have to,
Yeah.
but
I mean, for the slashiness, if we're gonna go hyperbole, I'd say 91 out of 10. There's just really no way of getting around it. I think this episode is one of the reasons this podcast probably exists. So
yes, basically.
overall, I would probably give it, and just because I've got others to compare it to, personally, me overall, I'd probably give it an 8.5.
Oh, sorry, do you mean
it's good.
Do you mean overall or for slashiness?
Yeah, for overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've kind of given it more or less the same. I decided to give it overall a score of 9 out of 10. I mean, even though objectively, I can see that series 5 is a very high quality series, and there are better episodes, but enjoy it so much that I really can't give it less than 9 out of 10. So there you go. And for slashiness, obviously I'm going to give it 10 out of 10, because how can you not give it 10 out of 10? I mean, 100 out of 10. And as you were saying, I mean, it is just those episodes where it's just screaming out the screen at you.
Exactly.
And that wraps up this episode of Smeg and the Femmes. Thank you to Veronica for technical help, and also thank you to my guest, Veronica Rich.
Thank you.
And the next episode we'll be covering is the frankly amazing Back to Reality. Spoiler alert, I adore this episode. I hope you'll join us then, but for now, goodbye.